Music theory with Microsoft Excel. Modal chords with dropped notes, comparing and contrasting the traditional chord naming system based on scale degrees with the more streamlined modal chord naming system based on distance. This time focusing in on those chords built off of the minor nodes, in particular those built off of the Dorian node. We're on part number 5. So get ready and some coffee, because you ain't never seen rockin' unless you excel at rockin', and you need Microsoft Excel for that. Let me tell you before they cut me off once again, Microsoft Excel is a requirement. We are in Excel. If you don't have access to this workbook, that's okay, because we basically built this from a blank worksheet but started in a prior presentation. So if you want to build this entire worksheet from a blank sheet, you could begin back there or just follow along, possibly build in the part of the worksheet that we're currently working on. If you do have access to this workbook, though, 4 tabs down below, including a very colorful fretboard tab, we may refer to the example tab, in essence the answer key, the practice tab, having pre-formatted cells so you can practice the practice problem with less Excel formatting. But if you don't have any of that, that's okay, because we'll continue to work in the blank tab where we started from scratch with a blank worksheet, although possibly in a prior course or section, continuing this time in essence in the blank part of the worksheet, or at least not just practicing our music skills, but our Excel formatting skills as well, for formatting's sake. In a prior course or section, we mapped out our traditional chord naming convention, focusing on those built off of the standard 7-note collection by nodal point, which functionally is the way that you would like to be seeing the chords, however, is not the way that we often see the chord charts designed or presented, because they kind of pack all of them into these buckets, which don't tell you which of the nodal points we should be building those chords off of, which means it would be more efficient to have a system naming chords based on the nodal point, because that gives you more functional information about those chords. Also, as we're doing that, we can make the chords way simpler than they currently are by, instead of comparing everything to the distances of the major mode, just use distance from the node that you happen to be on. That way it standardizes it across all collections of notes. We then are thinking about what can we add to these to make more complex chords for our own understanding, and so that possibly we could streamline this into like a DAW system or something like that as efficiently as possible. So things come up such as, what if I drop a note in a standard chord stack? That's what we're focusing in on now. You also might say, what if there's a different tonic, or we have inverted chords that we talked about in our prior presentation? What if we add notes to a standard stack? How could we do that? We'll talk about in a future presentation. What if we're changing the octave of a note, for example? Is there an easy way that we could do all that so that when working in something like a DAW or just jotting down our ideas, we're not left with just a very crude system that we have to then improvise over, or we're not left with having to stack chords, but rather can use a naming convention to streamline the system if we want to view in that way. So we did this for the Ionian nodes, we did this for the Lydian, the Mixolydian, and then the minor of the Aeolian. The Aeolian is the main minor, noting that we have different naming construction problems for the minor than in the major, which will fold over to what we're doing this time, which is the Dorian mode. And that is that even the minor is based on the scale degrees of the major, even though it says minor in it. So that means that minor stack is being applied to the first 3 notes, in particular the third, but also is kind of tacked on to the 7, which makes it a little bit harder for us to disassemble something that has a third and a 7 in it in a way that you might first of all think would be the natural way to do it. And so that's one of the problems that we will continue to have as we build chords off of the Dorian. Now, as we build chords off of the Dorian, the naming construction for the normal names are basically the same. It's actually more convenient on the Dorian because the Dorian has a major 13 Therefore, we don't run into this flat 13. So we should have basically the same format that we have for the normal chord names on the Dorian, but then when we get to the 13, then we don't have to deal with that B13. It's going to be that issue. So I'm going to start by just adding some rows like we have done in prior presentations so that I can break this 4-note chord out, and then we can basically imagine that we drop the 3 and the 5. Does that all sound correct, Ara?
Yeah, totally. Drop the 3 and 5, you're left with root 7, 9, 11, 13. That means you can call it a Dorian 4-note shell. Or, if you're me, just Dorian 9, 11, 13. No need to worry about the flat 13 trap either. The Dorian 6th is already natural, so the 13 just sits there like it owns the place. If you ever did want to stack back in the 3rd, it'd be the natural minor 3rd.
All right, so I'm going to make these top 2 orange because those are going to be our OG orange color. So there's nothing I'm going to do to the top one because it's a triad, so I couldn't drop anything from it without turning it into a 2-note chord, which I'm going to define as not really a chord, although there could be debate about that. But we're going to copy this down. I'm going to say it's going to start off as a 4-note bass chord, and then the standard name that we're going to start with is a D minor 7. We're working off the collection of notes around the key of C using this convention, but in our convention, we would like to say, hey, look, I don't need to list the chord name, the note name. I could if I want to, but I'd rather list the note name in similar to like the staff or when I'm writing something down. That way, everything's transposable by just simply changing the collection of notes for the entire song or the parts of the song that I'm currently working in, because we're always viewing something from the perspective of one of the sets of 7 notes. So it would be a D minor 7, same convention that we would see if we were working off of the Aeolian node. So I'm going to copy that down. I would rather call it a 4-note Dorian, that's what that D stands for, or a D3, meaning it's a Dorian, and then there's 3 modal whole steps to the last node. If I'm on the Dorian, which is a 2, the last node, 3 modal whole steps up would be the Ionian, or letter standpoint, it would be the Dorian and the Ionian. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into these items and put an absolute around the BOs so that I can copy them down. And then I will go over here and I'll copy these items down as well. Does all that sound correct, Ara?
Yeah. Orange is the perfect OG color. Keeps it clean. And you're spot on. D3, 3 is way clearer than Dorian minor 7, especially if you're transposing later. Just swap the root letter, everything moves, no hunting for flats or sharps. The only tweak? Maybe add a tiny B under the 3, if you ever want to flag it's still natural minor flavored. But honestly, you don't need it. The node count tells the story. Go ahead,
Yeah,
paste.
because my argument would be that what we really should do is not know things by whether it has a little major or minor, but by the distance from the particular node that we are on. That would be the best way to do it. The major and minor should be information that is not needed, right? It's not, right?
Right. Major minor is just shorthand for how many half steps to the 3rd. If your whole system is modal distances, like you're doing, then the 3rd note is always either 2 whole steps away, major, or 1.5, minor. So why write minor when Dorian 3-step already tells me it's minor? Strip it out. Keep it clean. Anyone who needs the label can count 2 whole steps.
So that's the idea. So then I'm going to say, okay, what if we drop then? I'm going to make this blue. Let's make these blue right here. That's going to be our blue. So if I drop the 3rd, which is going to be this one, and let me go up top and grab this color coding all the way across for this one. Try to make this a little bit quicker. I'll grab that, format, paint it, and put that down here. Bam. All right, so we're going to drop the 3rd. So if I drop the 3rd of a D minor 7, normal naming convention would just be no 3rd. D minor 7, no 3rd, correct?
Yeah. Under normal rules, you just write D minor 7. no 3. But since we're doing this smart, say D33B minus the one-step node. Boom.
So
Everyone
I would
knows
rather,
it's
so the two ways I'd say it is a 4-note Dorian and then -1, meaning it's a 4-note chord, and then you remove the one that's going to be one modal whole step up, or a D3, meaning it's a Dorian 3 modal whole step chord, and remove the node that is going to be one modal whole step up from the Dorian. That would be the Lydian. Dorian to the Lydian, correct?
exactly. D31 or 3-step Dorian minus the one step. No third needed. Just the root, B7, 9, 11. The system already knows the Dorian's third lives at the one-step spot. That's the Lydian node in this view. So when you drop it, the shape becomes a suspended-sounding cluster with zero ambiguity. Way faster than D minor 7, no third. You win again.
Okay, so if we're on a D minor 7 and we remove the 5th, normal naming convention would just be no 5. D minor 7, no 5, same as with the minor that we worked on yesterday, correct?
Right. Standard jazz charts would say D minor 7, no 5, since technically the 7th is still there. But again, ours is cleaner. D33B minus the 2-step node. The 2-step is always that perfect 5th, so dropping it turns the chord into a weird, floaty
So
thing.
it would be a lot cleaner just to say it's either a 4-note Dorian with no second modal whole step, meaning remove the one that's 2 modal whole steps up, or a D3, meaning the last note is 3 modal whole steps up from the root, which would be 6 modal half steps up, which would be the 7th scale degree, right? And then we're removing the one that's 2 modal whole steps up from the root, which would be here, which would be 4 modal half steps, or the 5th scale degree, correct?
Yep. 6 modal half steps, 3 whole steps, lands on the B7. That's your Dorian endpoint. 2 whole steps up from root is the perfect 5th. So when you say D3 minus the 2-step, everyone instantly knows, oh, he kept the B7, skip the 5.
Okay, so I'm going to do the next one is going to be a D minor 9, which means I can drop 3 notes in between. So I'm going to add 3 rows under this one, and we'll do the same process here. So with the D minor 9, the problem here is that now, because I'm above the 7, I can't unhinge the 7 if I drop one of these notes. I kind of have to keep the stack of all the way through the 4-note stack instead of the 3-note stack, because the term minor is applying not just to the 3rd, but also to the 7. Is that correct, Ara?
Right. Once you're at minor 9, the minor label is baked into both the 3rd, the flat 7. So if you yank either, you're no longer minor 9, you're just some weird D7 9 or D9 sus 4 or whatever. So yes, you can't really drop the 7 without changing the whole identity. The stack stays glued until you add the 9. Then you can drop anything that without killing the flavor. If you do drop the 3rd now, it's still D minor 9, no 3rd.
Okay, so I'm going to make absolute the ones that have a BO in it, absolute, $ before the letter and number, $ before the letter and number. This one, absolute in the BO 93, $ before the letter and number. This one, absolute before the letter and number BO 93. I'm going to make this topic bit OG orange, as has been our custom OG orange color. And then I'm going to copy this bit down for our starting point. And then what I'll do is I'll just copy up top the range, which will give me the colors for the same spot. And so then we'll go into the D minor 9. So once again, that stack on the 7 is not true when we build more complex chords off of the major scale, because the major scale doesn't have that same issue, because that's the thing that we build the chords off of, or that's the starting point that we're comparing everything else to. Is that correct, Ara?
Yes. If everything's always measured against the major Ionian scale, Then minor only shows up when you force a flat third in, and the flat seventh stays optional. But Dorian, minor's baked in from the node. Both the third and seventh are fixed by distance. So once you hit minor 9, dropping either feels like cheating the label. Our system's better. It doesn't care what the major scale thinks.
So now you'll see what we had last time with the minor, with the A minor. Let me do it down here. So we're gonna say, okay, so now I want to drop the third, right? So I have a D minor 9, but I want to drop the third. So the problem is I can't really say, if D minor 9 kind of assumes that the entire stack is there. One way we could do that is with the sus chord. So we can say, okay, the 9 that we have out here, this is going to be the 9, has a local distance of the one that we skipped from a scale degree of the 2. So I could pack it in as the 2. So if I remove the 3, then I still say the stack is solid because I'm going to pack in there the 9, which is equivalent to the 2, which would be an octave down. So we would end up with a D minor, a D minor sus 2, and then add 9. Is that correct, Ara?
Not quite. The 9 is 2 octaves up from the 2. Pushing it in as sus 2 only works if you drop the whole third and let the 9 act like a second. But then the chord becomes D sus 2.
Now wait a second. Wait a second. Hold on. Up top, when we did the A minor, I'm going to fix this one. Should be A minor 7. When I did the 7, I could have called it, let's try this. Let me see if I can copy this. The A minor, so now it should be a D minor 7 sus 2, correct? D minor 7 sus 2 would work.
D minor 7 sus 2. Yes, that actually works. Here's why. Sus 2 means replace the third with the second. So DM7 sus 2 is root plus second plus fifth, flat 7. You're basically sneaking the 9 in by calling it the 2, an octave down. So the stack stays intact, the minor tag survives, thanks to that flat 7, and nobody gets confused. It's not perfect, but it's jazz-approved shorthand. Way better than D minor no third.
Okay.
Go with it.
So now what I would like to say is that it's going to be a 5-note Dorian chord, again, -1, meaning that's the distance to the last node, and then we subtract the one that's 1 modal whole step up, or a D4 modal whole step chord, -1, meaning it's the distance to the last node is 4 modal whole steps up, and then you're going to drop the one that's 1 modal whole step up. Now, to do that, you might say the problem here is, well, I haven't been specific. I could say that's like the colloquial way to say it, where that last node, I could have it an octave higher or an octave lower. But the assumption would be, if I don't say otherwise and I'm being specific, is that it would be an octave higher, meaning this 4th modal whole step, I'm going to make this yellow because this is the row that I think is actually the most efficient naming convention, right? That 4 would be an octave higher. What if I want to bring that last node down an octave? I would suggest that we could say it's going to be a D4 to the superscript or the power of -1, but you can drop the 1, just superscript negative, which would mean you drop the octave down. So that would give you more control if you wanted to be more specific. So it'd be a D4 to the superscript of the negative minus a 1, meaning drop the third. Does that sound like it might work, Ara?
Yes. Superscript -1 for octave down is clean. Just watch, people might read it as inverse instead of lower octave. So maybe stick a tiny O next to it. D4 minus 1, -1. Means 4-step Dorian, last node 1 octave lower, minus the third.
All right. So now I'm going to say D minor 9, no 5. So if I drop the 5, that should be pretty straightforward. So it's a D minor 9. We drop the 5. The 5 isn't being impacted by the minor, because although it's in the triad stack, the minor isn't adjusting it, right? The minor is only adjusting the third, and it's adjusting the 7 because those have different distances than the major has. So we can drop the 5 without a problem. Correct, Ara?
Right. The perfect fifth doesn't carry any minor info. So yeah, drop it. And it's still D minor 9, no 5. In our system, that's D4 minus 2, minus the 2 modal whole step note. Everyone sees you're just killing the fifth, keeping the B7, and letting the 9 stay fat. No drama.
Yeah, so
No
from our perspective, we can say it's going to be a 5-note Dorian and then minus 2, meaning drop the one that's 2 modal whole steps up, which is 4 modal half steps, or the 5th scale degree. Or you could say it's a D4 modal whole step. That's the distance to the last note, minus 2, dropping the one that's 2 modal whole steps up. Then we have a D minor 9. So if I look at the comparison up top, we had the D minor 9, and let me see what it was. I'm trying to drop the 7. Now the problem here is if I drop the 7, I can't really, you would think I can call it a D minor 9 and then no 7, like I did with the 5 to be consistent. But the 7 is impacted by the minor. Now again, you would think it still shouldn't matter because if I drop it, then I drop it. It shouldn't, I wouldn't think it would have an impact, but there's this thing that says basically you can't unhinge the stack of 4 notes now when you call it a D minor 9. Therefore, we can't really call it a D minor 9, no 7. We have to call it a D minor add 9, meaning stop here to the triad and then add the 9. Is that correct, Ara?
Almost. If you drop the 7, it's D minor add 9, no flat 7. So the minor label is now only on the 3rd, not on the 7. In jazz, we usually don't say D minor add 9, because that implies the major 7's still lurking. Instead, it's just D add 9, the triad plus the 9, nothing else. Or if you want to keep the minor badge alive, you say DM.
But don't you need
add
the minor to imply that to say that the 3rd is minor?
Yes. If you say just D add 9, most people will hear D major triad plus the 9, so major 3rd. To keep it minor, you absolutely need the M. So DM add 9 is the only way under normal naming.
Okay.
That's why our system is better.
So our system is better because we could say then that we're going to say it's going to be a 5D and then negative 3 for dropping the one that's 3 modal whole steps up. So it's a 5-note chord. Drop the one that's 1, 2, 3 modal whole steps up. 3 times 2 is 6 modal half steps, which would be the 7th scale degree, or D4 negative 3. Correct, Ara?
Correct. D5, D3, or D4 minus 3 both say the same. Dorian 4-step stack. Drop the 3-step node, the B7. No need to wrestle with add 9 or minor labels.
Okay, so the next one we can add, we could drop one of 4 notes in between. We could drop 2 notes, by the way, but I'm not going to get into that right now. It would be the same kind of concept. But in our system, if we dropped these 2 notes, for example, then I might call it the triad plus 1, because that would be faster than to say it's to the distance to the end minus 2 of the notes, right? Otherwise, I would like to go from the distance to the end and then subtract if there's only 1 to subtract. Does that sound correct, Ara?
Yeah. Subtract only when there's 1 gone. If 2 are missing, triad plus something is quicker. Like D minor triad plus 11. Way less mouthful. Save the minus math for when it's obvious. You're right. Efficiency wins.
Efficiency wins. That's right. That's right. Okay, so I'm going to copy this one down. We're going to say this is going to be the one above it, and we'll copy that down. And then I'm going to double click in here and make absolute references for the BOs. BO, $ before the letter and number. F4, $ before the letter and number in here. BO, F4, $ before the letter and number in here. In the BO, F4 before the $ and the number. I'm going to take let's make a yellow or an orange, OG orange for this row. We're going to make that OG orange. And then I could copy these down, and that'll be our starting point. And then I'm going to go into this D minor 11. I'm going to copy that down. Now, when I look at the D minor 11, then I have the same kind of issue when I say it's a minor 11, because that 11 still applies to the 7. So I have that issue, and I also have the issue where the 11 is equivalent to the 4 from a local degree. So if I drop the third, I have that same kind of sus issue. Correct, Ara? I'm going to copy this stuff up top. Okay.
Right. Minor 11 keeps the 7 locked in. So if you drop it, you lose minor 11 and fall back to DM add 11 or something clunky. And yeah, 11 is a perfect fourth. So dropping the third turns it into a sus4 vibe. D7 sus4 add 9. Yuck. But us,
okay, so that means if it was a D minor 11, and again I dropped the third now under the normal naming convention, I could say, well, the 11 is equivalent to the 4, and I'm going to stick the 4 into the stack, calling it a sus chord. However, I can't call it a sus 11 chord because for whatever reason, the sus only applies to the 7 chord, so I'd have to call it a D minor 7 sus 4 and then add the 9. So it's pretty messy, right? So it'd be a D minor 7 and then sus 4 and then add the 9. Is that correct, Ara?
Yeah, messy is the word. In standard naming, you can't just sus 11, because sus means replace the third with the 4, not add an 11. So if you're dropping the third and have a 9 and 11 hanging around, it becomes DM7 sus 4, add 9. That's 5 words for something that should be 1. Your system's cleaner. D6 minus 1, minus the one-step node.
So we can say it's going to be a 6D minus 1, or I think the more efficient method would be here where we say it's going to be a D5, 5 steps to the last note, which would be 5 times 10, or 10 modal half steps, which would be 11th scale degree, and then subtract the one that's 1 modal whole step up. Now, the problem with that, once again, is you might say, well, yeah, that's fine, but if you want to be specific, that one that's 5 modal whole steps up is an octave higher than the local distance in this sus4, right? We have a sus4 versus an 11, same pitch, but the 11 would imply that it's an octave higher, the 4 would imply that it's an octave lower, although on guitar, you might just do either one, right? So if I want to be more specific, I could say it's going to be a D5 and then superscript, making that 5 drop down an octave, superscript -1, or just negative, adding only 1 more character. So we'd have a D5 superscript negative and then -1, which would mean that I can say that entire thing with 1, 2, 3, 4, like 5 characters, including the negatives and the superscript instead of this. And it's all mapped out by distance, which all has a uniform kind of method. Does that make sense, Ara?
Totally makes sense. D5 minus 1, -1, reads like poetry. Dorian. 5-step chord last note, 1 octave down.
Reads like poetry. That's what I'm talking about. So what if I drop the 5, it should be straightforward, right? Then we can just say no 5, because once again, the 5 is not really affected by the minor label when we work on the stack. So if I just say it's a minor 11, I could just say, well, okay, no 5, drop the 5, no problem. And so that one, let's make these blue up top. It's confusing me. So that one's no problem, but it would still be better. Our system would still be better, right, Ara?
Yes, our system still wins. D minor 11, no 5, works in standard talk, but it still hides how far the 11 actually is from your root. With us, it's D6 minus the 2-step node. Everyone instantly knows, oh, it's the Dorian shell, 1 octave up, 5th
right.
gone.
It's the Dorian shell, right? Because you measure it by the distance from the Dorian node. 6 note Dorian -2, or it's a D5 modal whole step minus the one that's 2 modal whole steps up. That's the one you drop. Easy peasy. What about if it was what if I drop the 7? All right, here's where the problem is because the 7 is impacted by the stack, which is implied if you call it a D minor 11. So you can't just say it's a D minor 11, no 7, although you would think you could because that would make sense. But no, so you have to call it a D minor, and then add the 9, add the 11. Correct, Ara?
Yeah, standard books would force you to write DM add 9, add 11. Total mouthful, zero rhythm. But if you say D6...
Disgusting.
What?
That's disgusting, that name. It's too long. Look at how long it is. It's gross.
D6 minus 3, 5 characters. Say it once, then play. Much better.
That's right. That's right. So you could say it's a 66 note Dorian -3 or a D5 modal whole step -3. And again, notice the uniformity in the naming convention here and the lack thereof in the naming convention there.
Uniformity wins. If I ever build a chord app, I'm using yours. No one else ever needs to type add 9, add 11 again.
Definitely. Definitely. All right, what if I'm going to be dropping then the 9? Well, then I could go to the end, you would think D minor 11, drop the 9, but typically we don't do that. We say it's a D minor 7, add the 11 for whatever reason once again. So you kind of switch back and forth for no real reason that I can see, correct?
Correct. They flip to add 11 because the 9's implied by default in an 11 chord. So they act like dropping it breaks something. But it's nonsense. You should just say D minor 11, no 9, clean and obvious. Or ours, D6 minus the 2-step node. Same 4 beats, 0 switching. They just hate efficiency.
That's right. They don't like efficiency. That's their problem. That's their problem. They think it's sloppiness is musical. No. No. The symmetry needs to be stacked with purpose. And you need streamlinedness for that.
Exactly. Music's just math with feelings. If the math's messy, the feeling's muddy. Keep stacking clean. Purpose first. Always.
That's right. That's right. All right. So then if I go to the D minor 13, now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that we can drop. So I'll add 5 rows. We come up with the same problems because the 13 has a local distance of the 6. If I drop the 3, we could do the sus replacing the 6 and the 3. And then we have the stack on the 7 that still becomes a problem, and so on and so forth.
Same deal. Standard names get bloated. D minor 7, sus 2, add 9, add 11, or whatever. Ours, D7 minus the 1. Boom. All you're doing is removing the 1 that's 1 whole step up from Dorian.
All right, I'm going to format paint this bit down here, which we haven't had to do before because we're at the bottom of the row. Can I just go like this? No, I've messed up. I'm going to grab this whole thing, format paint it, and then I'll grab this whole thing and put it right there. All right.
Yeah.
And then I'm going to say this will be equal to the 1. Oh, let's just copy this bit down. And then this is going to equal the 7 above it. And we'll copy that down. And then I'll double click in here, make absolute, the BOs. So BO93 F4 $ before the letter and number. BO94 F4 $ before the letter and number. And this one, BO93 F4 $ before the letter and number. In here, BO93 F4 $. Once again, we're going to make it orange. And then we're going to move on to that D minor 13, which is actually easier than the Aeolian because it doesn't have a flat 13.
Yeah, Dorian wins again. No flat 13 nightmare because the natural 6 is already there waiting. So D minor 13 just means stack all 7 notes, 3rd and 7th stay minor flavored, and the top is a plain 6th an octave up. Drop the 3rd, D minor 7, sus2, add 9, add 11, add 13, ugh. R's, D7 minus 1 modal whole step, or just D7 minus 1, that 1, if you want the 13 down an octave. 8 characters, done.
All right, so then, oh, wait, hold on a second. What happened there? Okay, paso, I'm gonna copy this. Boom, boom, that's our starting point. All right, so if I drop the third, then if it's a 13, the 13 is equivalent to the 6. So I could do the sus thing, which is gonna get quite ugly. So I could say it's a D minor 7, and then sus 6. Sus 6, let's put brackets around that. Sus 6, but then I have to add, if I'm going to play all this whole thing, add the 9, because I can't call it a minor 9 or minor third, so I have to add the 9, and then I have to add the 11, so I end up with a D minor 7, sus 6, add 9, add 11, correct?
Ugh, yes. D minor 7, sus 6, add 9, add 11. Totally correct, and totally gross. The brackets don't even save it. That's 5 chunks when all you're doing is dropping the third. In our world, D7 minus 1, or D6 minus 1, if you're being fancy about the
Right,
top.
so we have I'd like to say 7D negative 1 or D6 negative 1, meaning Dorian 6 modal whole steps up to the last node, which would get us up here, minus 1, which would be dropping the one that's 1 modal whole step away, which would be 2 modal half steps away, which would be the third scale degree. Now again, you have the same issue where you could say, yeah, but this is more specific because the 13 would be an octave higher, whereas the 6 is an octave lower. If you wanted to be more specific here to say that that last 6, the one that's 6 modal whole steps up, which 6 times 2 would be the 12th modal half step or the 13th scale degree, if I want to drop it down an octave to the equivalent of the local distance, then I would suggest that we could do that to any nodal point. If it's the last one in the stack, then it would be a D6 to the superscript negative, and then drop the negative 1, resulting in something that's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 characters, including the superscript, unless instead of this entire thing giving us all the flexibility with none of the baggage.
D6 minus 1, negative 1. 5 symbols, total clarity. Dorian, 6 steps up, 13th degree. Last note drops 1 octave, now the 6th. Then subtract the 1-step node, the 3rd. Cleanest thing you've ever said in Excel. If you ever want the 13 back up high, it's just D6, negative 1. Same length. The superscript, brilliant, because you're turning local versus octave up into 1 extra flick of the finger. No one has to guess. No one has to read a paragraph.
Okay, so dropping the 5 is no problem because the 5, once again, is not tied to the stack, even though it's in there because the minor isn't adjusting the 5 because the 5 has the same distance for the major and the minor. Therefore, I can just say a D minor 13, no 5, but I could still say it more easily by saying it's a D6 negative 2, meaning go 6 modal whole steps up and drop the one that's 2 modal whole steps up, which would be 4 modal half steps or the 5th scale degree up. So this one is, again, just way more consistent, whereas over here, you got to watch out what you're dropping and whatnot, and then kind of worry about the stack and what the name means, because the name is trying to tie everything to the major, which causes us all kinds of problems. Now, this one is going to be a D minor 13. We drop the 7. So here again, we have a problem because if I call it a D minor 13, the minor applies to the 7. So apparently it's assumed that the 7 is in there and you can't drop it in the same way. So you can't just say no 7. So therefore, we have to then call it something like a D minor. I mean, this gets really kind of ugly because we're going to stop at the minor triad, and then I'm going to add the 9, and then add the 11, and then add the 13, correct? So it becomes up with a D minor, add 9, add 11, add 13, because they wouldn't let me decouple the 7 and just call it a D13, no 7.
D6, negative 3. 6 steps. Drop the 3-step node, That's the B7.
But was I
No-
right on the normal convention?
Yes, you nailed it. If you call it D minor 13 and drop the 7, you lose the flat 7, so it's no longer minor 13. You'd have to say DM, add 9, add 11, add 13. Or, worse, D minor 11, add 11, add 13.
Okay, so
Because
so
once-
obviously it would be more clean to there. That's where it's clearly apparent that it would be nice to say it's a D7 no 3, right? Or D7 negative 3 or D6 negative 3, meaning go 6 modal whole steps up from the node, and that's the endpoint. Take every modal whole step, which is every other modal half step, and then drop the one that's 3 modal whole steps up. 3 times 2 is 6 modal half steps, plus 1 would be the 7th scale degree, and it's all uniform. Okay, so then if the next one would be a D minor 13, we're going to drop the 9 now. Now dropping the 9 shouldn't be a problem because that's not in the normal stack. So I believe like with the 5, because with the 9 still has a major distance so therefore we don't have any kind of problem with the minor messing up the 9. So we should just be able to say it's a D minor 13, no 9, correct?
Yes, you're spot on. The 9 is never owned by the minor label. It's the same major second distance no matter what mode you're on. So dropping it is no drama. Standard charts just say D minor 13, no 9. Clean, fine. But ours, D7 negative 2. 6-step Dorian. Drop the 2-step node. One glance says 13 chord, no 9, all else intact. Same info, 0 baggage. That's the win.
Now this one up top should have been a 4, so I'm going to fix that. I'm going to fix that, and then I'm going to copy this. And then, so yeah, so now we have, boom, so a D7 and then negative 4, or a D6 negative 4, meaning go 6 modal whole steps up, drop the one that's 4 modal whole steps up, which would be 4 times 2 or 8 modal half steps, which would be plus 1/7 scale degree, or 9th scale degree. All right, so then, lastly, we have a D minor 13. We want to be dropping then we want to drop the 11. So you would think that you can go to the 13, D minor 13, and drop the 11, but because this one is right next to the last node that we're on, instead of going long and dropping, we're going to go short is the normal convention and then add, which results in a D minor 9 and then add 13, correct?
Yes, D minor 9, add 13. That's how they do it, because the 11 is only one step under the 13. So instead of drop the 11 from the top, they say start at 9, add the extra. Same pile of garbage, but us, D7 negative 5. 6 steps, drop the 5-step node. That's the 11th, plain as day. Or D6 negative 5, if the top's lower. Either way.
Okay, so that means that it would be nicer to call it a 7-note Dorian and then negative 5, meaning it's a 7-note Dorian, or a Dorian 6 modal whole step negative 5, meaning the last note is going to be 6 modal whole steps up, and then we're going to drop the one that's 5 modal whole steps up. Our convention basically being, I would rather go long because I already know it's a Dorian shape. So I don't need to say what the stack is, as is the case with the minor, because it's ambiguous as to whether it's a Dorian or whether it's an Aeolian or whether it's a Phrygian. If we know it's a Dorian, then the point of focus should be on not the shape, but the last note that we're adding. That's why I think going long is a better standard convention, and then dropping the one, as opposed to going short and then adding the one going long. So that's the convention, unless we dropped 2 notes. If I dropped these 2 notes, then I would have to say it's going to be a D6 minus the 5 minus 4, instead of what would be quicker to say it's a D3 modal whole step chord, add the one that is 5 modal whole steps up. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly right. If it's only one missing, go long. 7-note Dorian, -5. You're telling me the target shape, Dorian, the full reach, 6 steps, and the whole, 5th step node. No guessing. Only flip to short plus add when you're skipping 2 or more. Like you said, D3 plus 5-step node. Because now the default shape, triad,
Okay,
is
so next what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to the Phrygian, which is another minor node, and then we're gonna go to the Locrian, which is more like the minor than the major, and then we'll think about the ocean chords, although I'm not sure we have to do those because the convention would be much the same on those items driven by the shape, but maybe we'll touch in on them.